Since it's Pride Month, I'm going to talk a bit about how to represent gender nonconformity in medieval clothing.
And this is actually a really complicated philosophical question as opposed to like something I can answer in a straightforward way, because the way medieval people express gender through clothes is actually very different than the way modern people did. And things that to us might not seem like an indicator at all, like wearing a belt, can define the gender of a clothing in the medieval period. Modern people might think that garment length is a definer of gender, but you see men wearing full-length garments a lot. Shortness usually defines male garment, but length doesn't. So I'm going to make a couple more videos about this because there's no way I can fit it into 1 minute and hopefully explain some of the things I'm showing you. But basically, gender cues in medieval clothing are quite complex, so what I usually do is just change what my gender expression is depending on what I'm doing.
So if you want to learn more, check out my next video. So we're talking representing gender nonconformity in medieval reenacting. This is a silly outfit I made up for a Christmas video a few years ago. The shortness of the gown and the belt would actually primarily coat it mask, which isn't going to twig the modern eye. Now the fact that I'm wearing a belt and a belt pouch is going to make this outfit a little bit of a envelope pushing in the gender norms of the medieval period. So here you can see some women and men all wearing like full-length garments. It's rarer to see women wearing belts on their overgowns, but you do see it. You can even see it in this picture. Here we have some military men. You can see full-length and shorter garments. So again, that's not something that would tweak the modern eye, because we see something knee-length, we usually just think feminine garment. Not true at all for the medieval period. However, very short garments, like the man in the kind of middle right here, always only worn by men. So if that's something you can take into account when you're choosing your style. This wide round neckline, generally only ever worn by women. You see high collars on both women and men, but not that low open collar on men. But here's another good example of the knee length or calf length garment on a man. Modern eye would say that's a dress. They did not say that at all. This is a manly garment, and it's a modest manly garment. The short garments worn by knights in the 14th century, late 14th century, were seen as extremely scandalous, which I find quite amusing. It's sort of like miniskirts in the 60s. Meanwhile, you can see Elizabeth in the back of this shot wearing a shorter overgown over a longer women's gown. The effect she calls her "my boyfriend's jacket" effect, which is a fun way to play with gender expression. There's another shot of that, because generally that shorter overgown wouldn't be worn by women. What I like to do is choose my clothing for functionality based on what I'm doing, rather than get super into mixing and matching my gender expressions. There's some really subtle ways that you can do that, like this belt and belt pouch, which sort of push the envelope into a masculine gender identity without really looking weird in terms of your historical impression. There are not as many hard and fast rules as we might think about clothing in the period. Again, there's a couple just length things that I wouldn't mess with, because I think it just does disservice to your historical impression. But generally, there's a lot more flexibility than we might think. Hope this was helpful. I'm not an academic or a costume historian, just a reenactor, so always research your own impressions.